How's it going? Cam here and welcome to today's video where we'll be breaking down how Declan Rice, one of Arsenal's big money summer signings, was exceptional against Newcastle and almost saved Arsenal single-handedly. Now, this game brought out both the best and the worst of Declan Rice in different ways. You can see in some of the ways that Arsenal set up to attack, they're sort of minimising Declan Rice's weaknesses, but in such a tense game, a hard-fought game where both teams had to sit in and defend deep and defend resolutely at times, Declan Rice's ability to carry the ball forward was a major difference maker and was almost the defining factor for Arsenal grinding out a much-needed draw or even going and getting the win. So, how did Arsenal set up, how did Newcastle set up, and how was Declan Rice so important? So to start with, we'll take a look at the board here, and we've got Arsenal set up in their attacking shape. So what you'll see is the ball currently with David Raya, and the idea from Arsenal's attacking shape, as we see from a lot of teams these days, is to outnumber the opposition back four. They'll attack with what's basically a front five. So between the centre halves, you've got Eddie Nketiah, wide one side you've got Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Martinelli the other side, and between Nketiah and Saka, so between the left back Dan Burn and the centre back on that side Fabian Schär, Kai Havertz tends to sit in those pockets, which makes sense. That's the sort of areas that he likes to operate in generally anyway. But on the left side, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. Now, many teams in this situation where they play with one sitting and two high eights in front, they tend to have the other eight in that pocket, and it tends to work relatively well because the profile of player that they've got in those positions are players that like to receive the ball on the half turn, get in the pockets and create things. However, none of those things, you will have noticed, describe Declan Rice particularly well at all. For all the things he is fantastic at, a brilliant athlete, fantastic in the duel, really good runner, good in the air, great leader, none of those attributes are best served when it's operating in small pockets between the defence and midfield lines. So what do Arsenal do instead? Well, Arteta's solution on this occasion was having Takahiro Tomiyasu operate in some of those pockets instead at times. So at times it was Rice in there, but it wasn't really too effective. Other times it would be Tomiyasu that goes and steps in there instead, leaving Rice to sit a little bit deeper where he's facing play and can get on the ball a little bit more easily to try and play forward. So that was sort of the best and the worst of Declan Rice in the sense that in this particular situation, Arsenal are actually having to set up to bring a fullback into an area where you'd want an attacking midfielder to be set because Declan Rice can't really get on the half turn and operate in pockets to the same degree. So the way that that was looking was the triangles either side. On the right side, you've got Saka, White and Havertz forming that triangle there, which has been relatively effective for Arsenal over the years, more so with Odegaard there than with Kai Havertz. But on the left side, you've got sort of Tomiyasu inside, Martinelli wide, and Declan Rice as that deeper option there, that sort of recycle option, that pivot option, if they need to pass backwards and go and play out the other side. In terms of the way Newcastle were defending, it tended to be more of a 4-5-1 or a 4-1-4-1 at times, with one of the midfielders dropping a little bit deeper. But the key point here is that when Arsenal had possession, Newcastle was sitting in really deep in their own third, and that set the tone for most of the game. So, that was the worst of Declan Rice in the way that Arsenal had to set up to mitigate his flaws. And if we now look at the other situation that was happening for parts of the game where Newcastle were on the attack, you'll see something very similar in the sense that there wasn't much sort of laziness or sloppiness from the Arsenal forward players, something that Manchester United's forward players could learn a thing or two from. But Arsenal were getting back into a really deep 4-4-2 block. Now this is where the best of Declan Rice ended up coming out. So most of the play was happening when Newcastle had the ball in the final third. It tended to be very compact in that final third there. And what was happening then was that the Arsenal centre-backs were getting lots of support from their fullback either side. I mean, Ben White and Tomiyasu were essentially extra centre-backs anyway, so they were very good at helping them sort of clear balls. Saka was getting in and helping defensively, as was Martinelli. Rice and Jorginho sitting really deep, compressing that space between the lines, so there wasn't much space for a cutback if Newcastle did managed to get the ball down the flanks. Again, something that Manchester United's midfield pivot could learn something from. Just a much better drilled team at the moment, Arsenal are, than Manchester United. And then for the rest of the team, it was Havertz and Nketiah that tended to sit a little bit higher. But when Newcastle did tend to recycle the ball around the back and get it into one of the midfielders, Havertz and Nketiah weren't scared to come all the way back, right to the edge of their box to really help out defensively. So this is a team that's really well unified. Now, the problem is, when you set up like this, yes, it does great in terms of nullifying the opposition team, but in terms of getting your own team up the pitch to try and score and create something something win the game, it doesn't really help. And the reason for that is that because everybody's back helping out defensively, if you do turn the ball over, there's no targets to aim for. So any long ball is going to be dropped pretty much straight on one centre-back or the other centre-back, or even Dan Burn if he's sitting a bit deeper, or anything longer than that will be very easily swept up by Nick Pope in the Newcastle goal. So in terms of playing long, there's not really any targets. And even in those moments when Nketiah does step a little bit higher and get there quickly to be in place for the transition, it's very difficult because he's dealing with a 3v1 situation against him. So it's likely going to be turned over quite quickly. So a long ball's not an option to try and get out. So the second option, can you play out and sort of pass your way out of these situations? Now, the problem is against Newcastle here, if you try and pass your way out of these situations, they're really well drilled, really focused, react very quickly. And Almiron, Bruno Guimaraes, Longstaff, Joel Linton, Callum Wilson and Anthony Gordon, the one thing they've all got in common is every single one of them is a fantastic athlete and a fantastic runner. Now, a few of them are a bit stronger in the duel. Obviously, Longstaff, Joel Linton, Guimaraes are a bit stronger potentially than Almiron, for example, in the duel. But they're all brilliant runners. They all react quickly. And so if you do try and pass your way out, the likelihood of getting 3, 4, 5 passes right, which is what it's going to take to actually get out and not just coughing the ball up to Newcastle in a dangerous area, is very, very unlikely. So we've ruled out passing your way out of that deep block. We've ruled out hitting a long ball. So the one missing link there, the one area or the way that Arsenal transition from this situation to a position where they can get something and try and threaten Newcastle is with a ball carrier that's able to get the ball through the lines, be a powerful runner, evade pressure where necessary, and that, in this situation, on this particular day, was Declan Rice. He was absolutely magnificent. If you take a look at this chart here, this shows the ball progression via passing and carrying for every player on the pitch, and you can see, in terms of ball progression, Declan Rice is miles above anybody else for what he does on the carries. That's the height on the graph, how high up he is there. And you can see he blew everybody out of the water. And the thing that impressed me was it wasn't just sort of carries from under no pressure, sort of dropping back deeper to pick the ball up to then dribble it across the halfway line and then move it on. He was at times beating 1 or 2, sometimes even 3 pressing players with some good footwork, good upper body strength and sort of long strides then to get forward and carry that ball up the pitch. But he was really, really mature with it as well. He wasn't just sprinting mindlessly with his head down. He was doing it in a controlled fashion, head up, looking for the next best option. So Declan Rice was absolutely terrific at that. And that was the attribute which enabled Arsenal's game plan to work, in the sense of dropping in deep, sitting in, trying to stop Newcastle getting anything from the game, but then also having the ability to break up the pitch quickly without having to play either long balls, which result in just more sustained pressure when Newcastle immediately win it back, or trying to play your way out of pressure with too many passes that end up, again, getting turned over quickly, because if you encourage that crowd as well at Newcastle, it's basically a 12th man, spurring the players on, turning their incredible physicality into pretty much superhuman physicality because of the boost they're getting. So Declan Rice's ability there was absolutely incredible for Arsenal, and he was one of the main drivers why Arsenal almost managed to get a result in what is one of genuinely the toughest places to go in the Premier League. Looking at Rice's stats then, haven't got the stats for, pure stats for his carrying yet, but looking at some of the other stats, 3 out of 4 ground duels won, which is pretty impressive. 4 out of his 6 long balls hit the target, 89% passing accuracy, pretty decent. And so overall, a very, very impressive game from Declan Rice, and something that I think he'll be hoping to replicate. Now, that issue we touched on at the start of the video here, in terms of him not being the best in the pockets, has sometimes hurt Arsenal in some of the smaller games, but in these big games here where Arsenal have got to sit in and be disciplined defensively, Rice's ability to get them up the pitch is genuinely a game changer. It was brilliant against Manchester City, brilliant again today, and look, you can see why they paid big money for him. Let me know what you thought of the video in the comments down below. We'll be hopefully back again soon for another tactical analysis video. And until next time, see you soon.